Uncover Poirot's secrets, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot reveals thrilling mysteries. Aboard the opulent sapphire yacht, anchored in the misty English Channel, a glittering emerald necklace vanishes at a lavish dinner, and hours later, Sir Reginald Ashbourne is found dead, poisoned in his cabin. Who stole the jewel, and why? Was it the fragile Lady Evelyn, hiding a scandalous past? The cunning Mrs. Langley, entangled in a fraudulent scheme? Or the defiant Clara Wentworth, whose bold facade masks deeper secrets? As whispers of betrayal echo through the yacht's polished corridors, Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective, steps into a web of lies, where every guest is a suspect, and a single clue, a pearl, a footprint, a cryptic note, could unravel a murderer's plan. Can Poirot's little gray cells pierce the fog of deception before the killer strikes again? Chapter 1. The Glitter of the Sapphire Yacht. The late afternoon sun cast a golden sheen across the glassy waters of the English Channel, where the sapphire yacht lay anchored off the coast of Devon. The vessel, a gleaming monument to wealth and leisure, swayed gently in the tide, its polished decks reflecting the light like a mirror. To the casual observer, it was a scene of serene opulence, a gathering of the elite, invited for a weekend cruise by the enigmatic financier, Sir Reginald Ashbourne. Yet, beneath the polished smiles and clinking champagne glasses, a current of unease rippled through the air, as though the yacht itself sensed the storm that was to come. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the faithful chronicler of Hercule Poirot's exploits, stood at the starboard rail, his eyes scanning the assembled guests. The invitation to this exclusive voyage had come as a surprise, for Hastings was no intimate of Sir Reginald's circle. It was Poirot, of course, who had secured their presence, though the little Belgian detective had been maddeningly vague about his reasons for accepting. "Mon ami," Poirot had said with a twinkle in his eye, "one does not refuse an invitation to a yacht. It is, how do you say, a stage set for drama." The guest list was a curious mix, as Hastings had already noted. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, the host, was a man of 50, with a hawk-like face and a reputation for ruthless business dealings. His wealth, amassed through speculative ventures in shipping and mining, was the talk of London's financial circles. Beside him stood his young wife, Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, a former actress whose beauty was as striking as her past was shadowed. Her emerald green gown shimmered in the sunlight, but her eyes darted nervously, as though searching for an unseen threat. Then there was Dr. Malcolm Fraser, a Harley Street physician with a penchant for gambling, pearl necklace. Mr. Julian Carver, a solicitor with a penchant for discretion, hovered near the bar, his thin lips pressed into a perpetual frown. And finally, there was Mrs. Beatrice Langley, a widow of indeterminate age, whose quiet elegance belied a steely resolve. She had been Sir Reginald's business partner in a mining venture, though rumors swirled of a deeper connection. Hastings sipped his champagne, his thoughts drifting to Poirot, who had yet to make an appearance. The little man had insisted on inspecting the yacht's layout upon their arrival, muttering something about the symmetry of a crime. Hastings smiled to himself. Poirot's eccentricities were as endearing as they were exasperating. The deck was alive with polite conversation, the guests mingling under the watchful eye of the yacht's captain, a grizzled man named Captain Harrow. His crew, efficient and unobtrusive, moved among the party, refilling glasses and offering canapés. The air was warm, the breeze gentle, and yet Hastings could not shake a sense of foreboding. Perhaps it was the way Lady Evelyn's hand trembled as she raised her glass, or the way Dr. Fraser's eyes lingered too long on Sir Reginald's retreating figure. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the deck, Sir Reginald clapped his hands for attention. "My dear friends," he began, his voice carrying the confidence of a man accustomed to command, "I trust you are enjoying the hospitality of the Sapphire yacht. Tonight we dine under the stars, and tomorrow we sail for the French coast. But first, a toast to new ventures and old friendships." The guests raised their glasses, though Hastings noted the varying degrees of enthusiasm. Clara Wentworth's smile was thin, almost mocking, while Julian Carver's expression remained unreadable. Mrs. Langley's eyes, however, were fixed on Sir Reginald with an intensity that made Hastings uneasy. Dinner was served in the yacht's grand dining saloon, a room of mahogany and crystal that gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers. The table was set for 8, with Sir Reginald at the head, Lady Evelyn to his right, and the others arranged in a careful balance of status and familiarity. Hastings found himself seated beside Miss Wentworth, whose sharp wit soon proved as cutting as her reputation. "You're a friend of that detective fellow, aren't you?" she asked, her voice low and conspiratorial. "What's his name? Poirot? Bit of an odd duck, isn't he?" Hastings bristled but maintained his composure. "Monsieur Poirot's a man of exceptional intellect," he replied. "His methods may seem unconventional, but his results are unparalleled." Miss Wentworth arched an eyebrow. "Results, you say? Well, I hope he's not expecting any drama this weekend. Sir Reginald's gatherings are usually dreadfully dull." Her tone suggested she believed the opposite. As the meal progressed, the conversation turned to Sir Reginald's latest venture, a speculative investment in a South African diamond mine. Mrs. Langley spoke with authority on the subject, her knowledge of the industry surprising Hastings. Dr. Fraser, meanwhile, seemed distracted, his fingers drumming nervously on the tablecloth. Lady Evelyn, seated across from Hastings, barely touched her food, her gaze flitting between her husband and the door. It was then that Poirot made his entrance, his small, precise steps echoing in the saloon. He wore a perfectly tailored dinner jacket, his mustache waxed to a faultless point. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, bowing slightly, "I apologize for my tardiness. The layout of this yacht, it is most instructive." Sir Reginald rose, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Monsieur Poirot, we are delighted you could join us. Please, take a seat." Poirot's eyes swept the room, taking in every detail: the placement of the silverware, the tilt of Lady Evelyn's head, the faint tremor in Dr. Fraser's hand. Hastings knew that look. Poirot was already at work, his little gray cells cataloging every nuance. The meal continued, but the atmosphere grew strained. Sir Reginald spoke at length about his plans for the diamond mine, his voice tinged with a defiance that puzzled Hastings. "There are those who doubt the venture," he said, his eyes locking with Mrs. Langley's. "But I assure you the rewards will be extraordinary." Mrs. Langley smiled thinly. "Rewards come to those who take risks, Sir Reginald, but risks, as we know, can be costly." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Hastings glanced at Poirot, who was buttering a roll with meticulous care, his expression unreadable. The detective's silence was as telling as his speech, and Hastings knew he was listening to every word, every pause. As the dessert course was served, a sudden cry broke the tension. It came from Lady Evelyn, who had risen from her seat, her face pale. "My necklace!" she gasped, her hands flying to her throat. "It's gone! The emerald pendant Sir Reginald gave me." The room erupted in murmurs. Sir Reginald's face darkened, and he barked at the crew to search the saloon. Hastings, ever the gentleman, moved to comfort Lady Evelyn, but Poirot's hand on his arm stopped him. "Observe, Hastings," Poirot whispered. "The necklace, it is not the true crime. It is but the prelude." The search yielded nothing, and the guests retired to their cabins with promises that the matter would be resolved by morning. Hastings followed Poirot to the deck, where the detective stood gazing at the starlit sea. "What do you make of it, Poirot?" Hastings asked. "A theft or something more?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the moonlight. "Mon ami are already at work." As the yacht rocked gently beneath them, Hastings felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The Sapphire Yacht was no longer a haven of luxury. It was a stage, as Poirot had said, for a drama that had only just begun. Word count, 1980. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Death. The morning sun rose over the Sapphire Yacht, its rays piercing the mist that clung to the English Channel. The vessel, anchored still off the Devon coast, seemed to hold its breath, as though aware of the darkness that had descended in the night. The theft of Lady Evelyn's emerald necklace had cast a pall over the guests, but it was a far graver event that now gripped the yacht in silent terror. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, the indomitable host, was dead. Captain Arthur Hastings stood in the grand dining saloon, where only hours before the guests had dined in strained civility. Now the room was a tableau of shock and suspicion. The long mahogany table, still set with the remnants of breakfast, bore witness to the chaos that had erupted shortly after dawn. It was Dr. Malcolm Fraser who had raised the alarm, his face ashen as he stumbled into the saloon, his voice trembling. "Sir Reginald, he's dead. In his cabin. I found him just now." The guests had gathered quickly, their faces a gallery of horror and disbelief. Lady Evelyn, her beauty marred by tear-streaked cheeks, clung to Mrs. Beatrice Langley, who stood rigid, her eyes fixed on some distant point. Miss Clara Wentworth, ever the cynic, surveyed the scene with a detached curiosity, her lips pursed as though suppressing a comment. Julian Carver, the solicitor, hovered near the door, his fingers twitching as if longing for a pen to record the unfolding drama. Dr. Fraser, still shaken, muttered medical jargon about heart failure, though his words lacked conviction. Hercule Poirot, summoned from his cabin, stood at the center of the saloon, his small frame radiating an authority that belied his stature. His mustache was impeccably waxed, his eyes sharp as they scanned the assembled company. Hastings, standing at his side, felt the familiar thrill of watching Poirot at work. The little Belgian detective was never more alive than in the presence of a mystery, and this, Hastings knew, was no mere theft. "Monsieur le Capitaine," Poirot said, addressing Captain Harrow, who stood grim-faced by the saloon's entrance. "You will please ensure that no one leaves this yacht. The police, they must be informed, but until they arrive, Hercule Poirot will take charge of this matter." Captain Harrow nodded, his weathered face betraying no emotion. "As you say, Monsieur Poirot, I've already radioed the Coast Guard. They'll send a long crisis." Hastings nodded, though he felt a pang of unease. The saloon was heavy with tension. "Dames et messieurs," he addressed the room, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Sir Reginald Ashbourne is indeed dead, but this is no natural passing. He has been murdered, poisoned, I suspect, though the method is not yet clear. The police will confirm, but until then I ask for your cooperation. No one is to enter or leave Sir Reginald's cabin, and all must remain on board." A collective gasp rose from the guests. Lady Evelyn let out a choked sob, burying her face in her hands. Mrs. Langley's eyes narrowed, her composure faltering for the briefest moment. Clara Wentworth set down her glass with a sharp clink, her expression unreadable. Julian Carver stopped pacing, his gaze fixed on Poirot as though weighing his words. "Poisoned?" Dr. Fraser stammered. "But that's impossible. I examined him myself. There were no signs of—" "Patience, doctor," Poirot interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "The little gray cells, they do not rush to conclusions. We must proceed methodically. Now I will ask each of you to recount your movements last night and this morning. Every detail, It matters. The interviews began, with Poirot seated at the head of the dining table, a notebook open before him. Hastings stood nearby, marveling at the detective's ability to command a room. Poirot's questions were precise, his manner polite but unrelenting. He began with Lady Evelyn, whose voice trembled as she spoke. "I retired to my cabin after dinner," she said, her eyes red-rimmed. "Reginald was upset about the necklace. He said he would deal with it in the morning. I didn't see him after that, I swear it." Poirot nodded, his pen scratching across the page. "And you heard nothing? No footsteps, no voices?" "Nothing," she whispered. "I took a sleeping draught and was out until morning." Mrs. Langley was next, her account delivered with cool precision. "I was in my cabin by 10 o'clock. I read for an hour, then slept. I heard nothing unusual." Clara Wentworth's story was equally straightforward, though her tone carried a hint of defiance. "I had a nightcap on the deck, then went to bed. Alone, I might add. I saw no one and heard nothing." Julian Carver claimed to have worked late in his cabin, reviewing legal documents. "Sir Reginald had asked me to look over some contracts," he said, his voice clipped. "I was up until midnight, then slept." Dr. Fraser's account was less composed. "I checked on Sir Reginald before bed. He complained of indigestion. I gave him a mild sedative and left. This morning I found him like that." His voice broke, and he looked away. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he closed his notebook. "Merci, mes amis. Your accounts, they are most illuminating. But there is one thing I must know. The emerald necklace. Has it been found?" Captain Harrow shook his head. "We searched the saloon again this morning. Nothing." Poirot's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Very well. The necklace, it is a thread in this tapestry. And now, I must examine the scene of the crime once more. Hastings, you will join me." The two men made their way to Sir Reginald's cabin, a spacious suite at the yacht's stern. The body lay on the bed, covered now with a sheet. Poirot lifted it carefully, revealing Sir Reginald's face, frozen in a rictus of pain. His skin was pale, his lips faintly blue. A glass of water sat on the bedside table, half empty, beside a small vial of pills. "Poison, you say?" Hastings asked, his stomach turning. "Oui," Poirot replied, his eyes scanning the room. He bent to examine the glass, then the vial, his fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. "The symptoms, they suggest a rapid-acting poison. Perhaps cyanide, though the delivery, it is curious." He moved to the desk, where a leather-bound journal lay open. The page bore a single entry, dated the previous evening. "The truth will out. I know who betrayed me." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he read it aloud. "A clue, Hastings. Sir Reginald knew something dangerous." As they left the cabin, Poirot paused at the door, his gaze sweeping the corridor. "This yacht, mon ami, it is a puzzle box. Every lock, every key, it matters. And the necklace, it is not what it seems." Back in the saloon, the guests remained, their faces drawn with fear and suspicion. Poirot stood before them, his voice steady. "The murderer is among us," he said. "But fear not. Hercule Poirot will find the unthinkable." The Sapphire Yacht was no longer a place of leisure. It was a prison, and the game had only just begun. Word count, 1980. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The Sapphire Yacht rocked gently on the waves of the English Channel, its polished decks now a stage for suspicion and dread. The news of Sir Reginald Ashburn's murder had settled over the guests like a fog, and the morning's brightness seemed a cruel mockery of the darkness that had enveloped the vessel. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with a mind as sharp as his mustache, had taken command of the situation, his presence a quiet reassurance amidst the chaos. His arrival, though unexpected, was no accident, and as he stepped into the dining saloon that morning, his keen eyes missed nothing. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever at Poirot's side, felt a familiar mix of awe and frustration as he watched his friends survey the scene. Poirot had been summoned to the yacht not by chance, but by a cryptic letter from Sir Reginald himself, received just days before the voyage. Monsieur Poirot, the letter had read, I fear a grave injustice threatens my peace. Your discretion and intellect are required. Join us on the Sapphire yacht. The note had been vague, but its urgency had piqued Poirot's curiosity, and so here they were, entangled in a mystery far darker than a stolen necklace. Poirot stood at the center of the saloon, his small frame radiating authority. The guests, still reeling from the discovery of Sir Reginald's body, sat in uneasy silence, their eyes darting between one another. Lady Evelyn Ashburn, pale and fragile, clutched a handkerchief, her grief tinged with something Hastings could not quite place, fear, perhaps, or guilt. Mrs. Beatrice Langley sat beside her, her composure a stark contrast to Lady Evelyn's distress, though her fingers betrayed a slight tremor as they rested on the arm of her chair. Miss Clara Wentworth lounged with affected nonchalance, her sharp gaze missing nothing. Julian Carver, the solicitor, stood near the window, his thin face taut with tension. Dr. Malcolm Fraser, who had first discovered the body, fidgeted nervously, his medical expertise seemingly useless in the face of such a crime. Poirot's arrival had been a surprise to all but Hastings, who knew his friend's penchant for appearing precisely when needed. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice steady and precise, I regret that our voyage has taken such a tragic turn. Sir Reginald's death is no accident, and I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover the truth. But I require your assistance. You must speak freely. For every detail, it is significant. The guests exchanged wary glances, their alibis already given but their secrets still guarded. Poirot had spent the morning examining Sir Reginald's cabin, noting the half-empty glass of water, the vial of pills, and the cryptic journal entry betrayed me. These clues, combined with the missing emerald necklace, formed a puzzle that Poirot's little gray cells were already piecing together. He began his inquiries anew, this time with a focus on the hours before the murder. Let us establish the timeline, he said, opening his notebook with a flourish. Sir Reginald was last seen alive at approximately 10:30 p.m. when Dr. Fraser visited his cabin. He was found dead at 8:15 a.m. this morning. We must account for the intervening hours. Poirot turned first to Captain Harrow, the yacht's grizzled commander, who stood by the saloon door. Capitaine, you were on deck last night, oui? What did you observe? Harrow's voice was gruff but steady. I made my rounds at 11 p.m. All was quiet. The guests had retired, and the crew was at their posts. I saw no one near Sir Reginald's cabin. Poirot nodded, his pen scratching across the page. He turned to Lady Evelyn, whose eyes were red-rimmed, but wary. Madame, you mentioned a sleeping draught. At what time did you take it? Shortly after dinner, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Around 9:30 p.m. I was upset about the necklace. I slept until morning. And you heard nothing? Poirot pressed, his gaze piercing. Nothing, she insisted, though her hands twisted the handkerchief into knots. Mrs. Langley was next, her account as precise as before. I retired at 10 p.m., read until 11, then slept. I heard no disturbances. Clara Wentworth's tone was sharp, almost defiant. I had a brandy on the deck at 10:15, then went to my cabin. I saw no one, heard nothing. Julian Carver's story remained unchanged. I worked on contracts until midnight, then slept. My cabin is far from Sir Reginald's. Dr. Fraser, still shaken, repeated his earlier account. I gave Sir Reginald a sedative at 10:30 p.m. for indigestion. He seemed fine. This morning, I found him dead. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he closed his notebook. Merci. Your accounts are consistent, yet they leave gaps. The necklace, it remains missing, and Sir Reginald's journal suggests he knew of a betrayal. It is a thread we must follow. He excused himself to revisit the crime scene, beckoning Hastings to follow. The walk to Sir Reginald's cabin was silent, Poirot's mind clearly at work. The suite was as they had left it, the body covered, the glass and vial untouched, the journal open suggested tension. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Possible, mon ami. The mine, it is a motive for many. Greed, envy, revenge. But we must not leap to conclusions. The necklace too, it is a puzzle. Why steal it, only to leave it unfound? They returned to the saloon where the guests remained, their tension palpable. Poirot addressed them once more. I have learned much, but more remains hidden. The truth, it is like the sea, deep and restless. I will find it. He dismissed the group, but asked Captain Harrow to remain. Tell me, Captain, of the yacht's layout. Are there routes to Sir Reginald's cabin that avoid notice? Harrow hesitated, then nodded. There's a service corridor below deck. It's used by the crew, but a guest could access it if they knew the way. Poirot's eyes sparkled. Bon. This corridor. It is a possibility we must explore. As the guests dispersed, Hastings caught a fleeting glance between Mrs. Langley and Julian Carver, a look of understanding or perhaps conspiracy. He made a mental note to mention it to Poirot later. The detective, meanwhile, stood at the saloon's window, gazing at the sea. Hastings, he said softly, this yacht is a microcosm of human nature. Ambition, deceit, fear. The murderer is here, and they are clever. But Hercule Poirot is cleverer still. The Coast Guard's launch was due soon, but Hastings knew Poirot would not wait for their arrival. The little gray cells were already unraveling the mystery, and the sapphire yacht would yield its secrets in time. Chapter 4. The Questions Deepen. The sapphire yacht lay still under the midday sun, its gleaming hull a stark contrast to the shadow of murder that now darkened its decks. The Coast Guard's launch was expected within the hour, but Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instinct for truth, had no intention of waiting for their arrival to advance his investigation. The dining saloon, once a scene of opulent civility, had become a courtroom of sorts, with Poirot as both judge and inquisitor. His sharp eyes missed nothing, and his questions, delivered with the precision of a fencer's thrust, were designed to pierce the veils of deception woven by the guests. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the saloon's grand windows, watching the assembled company with growing unease. The guests, confined to the yacht by Poirot's orders and the inescapable reality of their isolation, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Lady Evelyn Ashburn, her face pale and drawn, sat clutching a fresh handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously toward the door. Mrs. Beatrice Langley maintained her composed demeanor, though her fingers tapped a subtle rhythm on the arm of her chair. Miss Clara Wentworth, ever defiant, lounged with a cigarette in hand, her sharp gaze. Reginald's body seemed to shrink into himself, his medical authority diminished in the face of Poirot's scrutiny. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small figure commanding the room. His notebook lay open before him, its pages filled with meticulous notes on the guests' alibis, the layout of the yacht, and the cryptic clues left in Sir Reginald's cabin. The half-empty glass of water, the vial of pills, the journal entry, the truth will out, I know who betrayed me, all pointed to a crime of calculation and motive. The missing emerald necklace, too, remained a tantalizing thread, its significance unclear but undeniable. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. We are gathered to uncover the truth of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder. Each of you has provided an account of your movements, but accounts, they are not always the truth. The little gray cells, they demand precision. Let us revisit the events of last night with particular attention to the details. He turned first to Lady Evelyn, whose fragility seemed to deepen under his gaze. Madame, you retired to your cabin at 9:30 p.m., taking a sleeping draught. This draught, it was prescribed by whom? Lady Evelyn hesitated, her fingers twisting the handkerchief. Dr. Fraser, she said softly. He gave it to me some weeks ago, for my nerves. Poirot's eyes flicked to Dr. Fraser, who nodded nervously. Yes, I prescribed a mild sedative, chloral hydrate. Perfectly safe in small doses. Bon, Poirot said, making a note. And the vial, madame, where is it kept? In my cabin, on the dressing table, Lady Evelyn replied. I took it last night, as I said, and slept until morning. Poirot's lips twitched, but he said nothing, turning instead to Mrs. Langley. Madame Langley, you were a business partner of Sir Reginald's, oui? This diamond mine venture, it was a point of contention, perhaps. Mrs. Langley's eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice remained steady. We had disagreements, yes, but nothing unusual in business. Sir Reginald was confident in the mine's potential, as was I. Our partnership was mutually beneficial. Yet his journal speaks of betrayal, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. A word. It carries weight. Did you sense such a betrayal? Mrs. Langley's composure held, though her fingers stilled. Sir Reginald was prone to dramatic phrasing. I know of no betrayal. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Clara Wentworth. Mademoiselle, you were on the deck at 10:15 p.m., enjoying a brandy. You saw no one, you say, but the deck, it is a place of... You were too late on contracts. These contracts, they were for the diamond mine venture? Carver's thin lips pressed into a line. Yes, Sir Reginald asked me to review the terms. It was routine work, nothing more. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Routine, yet urgent enough to keep you until midnight. Most interesting. Finally, he addressed Dr. Fraser. Doctor, you visited Sir Reginald at 10:30 p.m. He complained of indigestion, and you gave him a sedative. This sedative, it was from your own supply. Yes, Dr. Fraser said, his voice unsteady. A mild dose, nothing dangerous. I keep a small medical kit in my cabin. And you saw nothing unusual in his demeanor, Poirot pressed. He was agitated, Dr. Fraser admitted. The necklace business upset him, but he was in good health as far as I could tell. Poirot closed his notebook with a snap. Merci. Your answers, they are like pieces of a mosaic. Some fit, some do not. But the picture, it begins to form. He excused the guests, asking them to remain in the saloon while he and Hastings conducted a further inspection of the yacht. As they walked toward the service corridor Captain Harrow had mentioned, Hastings could not resist voicing his thoughts. Poirot, they're all hiding something, aren't they? Lady Evelyn's nervous, Mrs. Langley's too calm, Clara's too flippant, Carver's too vague, and Fraser's a wreck. Poirot smiled faintly. You observe well, mon ami, but you do not yet see. The truth, it is in the contradictions. The sedative, the journal, the necklace, these are not separate threads, but part of the same tapestry. The service corridor was narrow and dimly lit, its walls lined with pipes and storage lockers. Poirot moved with purpose, his eyes scanning every surface. At the end of the corridor, near the entrance to Sir Reginald's cabin, he paused, crouching to examine the floor. Regardez, Hastings, he said, pointing to a faint smudge of dirt. A footprint, perhaps? Too small for a man, but not for a lady's shoe. Hastings frowned. Lady Evelyn? Mrs. Langley? Clara? Patience, Poirot said, rising. The footprint. It tells us someone was here where they should not have been. but we must confirm." They returned to Sir Reginald's cabin, where Poirot examined the glass of water once more. "No residue, no odor," he murmured. "The poison, it was administered with care, perhaps in the sedative, perhaps elsewhere." He turned to the journal, flipping through its pages. Most were filled with business notes, but one entry, dated a week earlier, caught his eye. "E knows more than she admits. The mine is a risk, but the real danger lies bringing two officers who deferred to Poirot's authority. He briefed them briefly, insisting that the body remain undisturbed until a forensic analysis could be conducted. The officers agreed, stationing themselves near the cabin to ensure compliance. As the guests were dismissed to their cabins, Poirot lingered, his gaze fixed on the sea beyond the windows. "Hastings," he said softly, "this murder is a crime of the mind as much as the body. The killer they planned carefully, but they cannot outwit Hercule Poirot." Hastings nodded, though the weight of suspicion hung heavy. The footprint, the journal, the missing necklace, all pointed to a web of deceit, and he knew Poirot was only beginning to unravel it. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The Sapphire yacht remained anchored in the placid waters of the English Channel, its opulent exterior belying the tension that simmered within. The arrival of the Coast Guard had done little to ease the atmosphere of suspicion, and the guests, confined to the vessel, moved with the wariness of actors in a play they did not fully understand. Hercule Poirot, however, was in his element, his little gray cells weaving together the threads of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder with a precision that Captain Arthur Hastings could only admire. Hastings stood on the upper deck, the sea breeze ruffling his hair as he watched the horizon. The events of the morning, the discovery of Sir Reginald's body, the cryptic journal entry, the missing emerald necklace, and now the faint footprint in the service corridor, had left him restless. Poirot's calm assurance was a comfort, but Hastings could not shake the feeling that the truth was slipping through their fingers, obscured by the polished facades of the yacht's guests. Below deck, Poirot had gathered the suspects once more in the dining saloon, his request framed as a necessity to clarify certain inconsistencies. Hastings joined him, noting the strained expressions of the assembled company. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne sat with her hands clasped tightly, her eyes red but resolute, as though steeling herself against further revelations. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, ever composed, watched Poirot with a calculating gaze. Miss Clara Wentworth, her cigarette replaced by a glass of sherry, exuded a bored defiance that Hastings suspected was a mask. Julian Carver, the solicitor, stood near the bar, his thin fingers fidgeting with a cuff-link. Dr. Malcolm Fraser, still shaken, seemed to shrink under Poirot's scrutiny, his medical bravado eroded by the weight of the crime. In plain sight. He turned to Dr. Fraser, whose nervous demeanor had drawn the attention of the Coast Guard officers. "Doctor, your discovery of the body has placed you at the forefront of suspicion. The sedative you gave Sir Reginald, was it from your own kit or did you retrieve it from elsewhere?" Fraser's face flushed. "From my kit, as I said. I keep a small supply of medications for emergencies. It was a standard dose of chloral hydrate, nothing that could cause what happened." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Yet Sir Reginald is dead and the symptoms suggest poison. You are a physician, monsieur. Could the sedative have been tampered with?" Fraser's hands trembled. I don't see how. I keep my kit locked in my cabin. No one else had access. No one. Poirot pressed, his tone deceptively gentle. You are certain? Fraser hesitated, his eyes darting to Lady Evelyn. Well, I suppose someone could have entered my cabin, but I saw no signs of tampering. The room stirred, and Hastings noted Lady Evelyn's sharp intake of breath. Poirot, however, moved on, turning to Clara Wentworth. Mademoiselle, your presence on the deck at 10:15 p.m. is most interesting. You say you were alone, yet the deck offers a clear view of the corridor leading to Sir Reginald's cabin. Did you see anyone? Perhaps someone using the service corridor? Clara's lips curled into a faint smile. I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I saw nothing. The deck was quiet and I was enjoying my brandy, not playing watchdog. Poirot nodded unperturbed. And the necklace, mademoiselle? You were seated beside Lady Evelyn at dinner when it was last seen. Did you notice anything unusual? Clara's smile faded. I noticed Lady Evelyn fussing with it as she always does, but I didn't see it vanish, if that's what you're implying. Lady Evelyn's voice broke the tension. I told you it was stolen. I felt it slip from my neck during dinner. Someone took it. Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. Patience, madame. The necklace, it is a distraction, but not without purpose. Let us consider another matter. He turned to Mrs. Langley. Madame, Sir Reginald's journal speaks of betrayal, and your partnership in the diamond mine venture was significant. Were there disputes over the terms of this venture? Mrs. Langley's eyes met Poirot's without flinching. Business always involves disputes, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Reginald and I disagreed on certain investments, but we resolved them. There was no betrayal. Yet his journal suggests otherwise, Poirot said, tapping his notebook. The initial E. It could refer to many things. Evelyn, perhaps, or another name, or something else entirely. Julian Carver, who had been silent. Business rivals. Not anyone here. Poirot's lips twitched. A convenient theory, Monsieur Carver. But the Sapphire Yacht is a closed circle. The betrayer and the murderer is among us. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, and Hastings felt the weight of suspicion settle heavier on the room. Dr. Fraser, in particular, seemed to crumple under the scrutiny, his nervous fidgeting drawing the Coast Guard officer's attention. I didn't do it, Fraser burst out, his voice cracking. I'm a doctor, not a murderer. I tried to help him. Poirot's gaze softened, but only slightly. Calm yourself, doctor. The truth, it will emerge. But first we must clear the fog of these red herrings. He dismissed the guests, asking them to remain available for further questions. As they dispersed, Hastings followed Poirot to the service corridor, where the faint footprint had been found. Poirot crouched again, examining the smudge with a magnifying glass. It is a woman's shoe, Hastings, he said. Narrow, elegant. But whose? Lady Evelyn, Hastings ventured. Or Clara? She was on the deck near the corridor's entrance. Poirot shook his head. We must not assume. The footprint is a clue, but it may be another distraction. Come, let us revisit the cabin. In Sir Reginald's suite, the air was heavy with the scent of death. Poirot examined the glass of water again, then the vial of pills. The poison, he murmured. It was likely in the water, not the sedative. But how was it delivered? The glass was half empty, suggesting Sir Reginald drank it willingly. He turned to the journal, flipping to earlier entries. One, dated 3 days prior, read, C is too bold, but her ambition blinds her. Another, from a week ago, mentioned, Monsieur knows my secret, but his price is too high. More initials, Hastings said, frowning. C could be Clara. M could be Malcolm, Dr. Fraser. Or it could be misdirection, Poirot replied. Sir Reginald was a man of secrets, and secrets breed enemies.
We must tread carefully." As they left the cabin, Hastings caught a glimpse of Clara Wentworth lingering near the saloon, her eyes fixed on Mrs. Langley, who was speaking in hushed tones with Carver. The exchange was brief but intense, and Hastings made a mental note to report it to Poirot. Back on the deck, Poirot stood gazing at the sea, his hands clasped behind his back. "Hastings," he said, "the red herrings, they are many. Dr. Fraser's nervousness, Lady Evelyn's tears, Clara's defiance, all distract from the truth. But the truth, it is like the tide. It cannot be stopped." The Coast Guard officers approached, reporting that the body would be examined by a coroner once the yacht reached shore. Poirot nodded.
The game was far from over. The Sapphire yacht held its secrets tightly, but Poirot's relentless logic was closing in. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The Sapphire yacht shimmered under the afternoon sun, its polished surfaces reflecting a deceptive calm that belied the storm of suspicion brewing within. The murder of Sir Reginald Ashburn had transformed the vessel into a floating prison, where every glance and gesture carried the weight of hidden motives. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing on the upper deck, felt the oppressive atmosphere keenly, his mind replaying the morning's revelations. The poisoned glass, the cryptic journal entries, the faint footprint in the service corridor. Hercule Poirot, with his unerring knack for uncovering truth, was methodically peeling back the layers of deceit, and Hastings knew that a pivotal clue was about to emerge. In the dining saloon, Poirot had gathered the guests once more, his request framed as a necessity to refine the details of their accounts. The Coast Guard officers, stationed discreetly near the door, added an air of official gravity, though it was Poirot who commanded the room. His small frame, immaculate in a tailored suit, stood at the head of the table, his notebook open, his eyes scanning the assembled company with a precision that made Hastings marvel. Lady Evelyn Ashburn sat with a fragile composure, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her expression unreadable, watched Poirot with a quiet intensity. Miss Clara Wentworth, her defiance tempered by a flicker of unease, sipped a glass of water with studied nonchalance. Julian Carver, the solicitor, stood near the bar, his thin fingers adjusting his tie repeatedly. Dr. Malcolm Fraser, still rattled, avoided eye contact, his medical authority diminished by the shadow of suspicion. Poirot's voice, when he spoke, was calm but laced with purpose. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "the murder of Sir Reginald Ashburn is a crime of calculation, not chance. The clues, they are subtle, but they speak loudly to those who listen. Today we focus on a detail, a small inconsistency that reveals much." He turned to Lady Evelyn, whose pale face seemed to pale further under his gaze. "Madame, you have said the emerald necklace was stolen during dinner, yet you felt it slip from your neck. Tell me, precisely, when did you notice it was gone?" Lady Evelyn's voice trembled. "It was during the main course, I think. I touched my throat, and it wasn't there. I thought it had fallen, but it was nowhere on the floor." Poirot nodded, making a note. "And you?" Poirot's lips twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as suppressed amusement. "Bon, and you, Monsieur Carver," he continued. "You were seated across from Lady Evelyn. Your eyes, they are sharp, like those of a solicitor who misses nothing. Did you see the necklace?" Carver hesitated, his fingers stilling on his tie. I recall seeing it early in the meal, but I was focused on Sir Reginald's conversation about the mine. I didn't notice when it disappeared." Poirot's gaze shifted to Mrs. Langley. Madame, you were to Sir Reginald's left. Did you observe anything unusual at the table? Mrs. Langley's voice was steady, almost too steady. Nothing out of the ordinary. Lady Evelyn was distressed, but that was understandable, given the value of the necklace. Poirot closed his notebook with a deliberate snap. Merci. Your accounts, they are consistent, yet they lack precision. Let us turn to another detail. The glass of water in Sir Reginald's cabin. It was half empty, suggesting he drank from it. But when and how was the poison introduced? Dr. Fraser, who had been silent, spoke up, his voice unsteady. I told you, I gave him a sedative, not poison. The glass was on his bedside table when I left at 10:30 p.m. I didn't touch it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Precisement, doctor. You did not touch it, but someone did. And now, we come to the clue that changes all. He reached into his pocket and produced a small, folded piece of cloth, a handkerchief, embroidered with the initial C. The guests gasped, and Clara Wentworth's glass froze halfway to her lips. This, Poirot said, holding it aloft, was found in the service corridor, near the footprint. It is a lady's handkerchief, delicate and costly. Mademoiselle Wentworth, is it yours? Clara's face hardened, but she recovered quickly. It could be anyone's. C could stand for Clara, but it could also be Caroline or Catherine, or a coincidence. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Poirot's clever, and they know I am watching. In the service corridor, Poirot examined the footprint again, comparing it to the handkerchief. The footprint is small, feminine, he said. The handkerchief, it is delicate. But why leave it here? To point to Mademoiselle Wentworth? Or to divert us from another? They proceeded to Sir Reginald's cabin, where Poirot examined the bedside table with renewed focus. The glass of water, now in the custody of the Coast Guard for analysis, had left a faint ring on the wood. Poirot traced it with a finger, then turned to the vial of pills. The sedative, he murmured. Dr. Fraser claims it was harmless, but we must confirm. He opened the journal again, flipping to a page dated 2 days prior. The emerald is more than a jewel. It hides a truth I cannot yet speak. Hastings, reading over his shoulder, frowned. The emerald necklace? Is that what he meant? Perhaps, Poirot said. Or perhaps the emerald is a metaphor, a code for something else. Sir Reginald was a man of secrets, and secrets are dangerous. As they left the cabin, Hastings noticed a crew member, a young steward named Thomas, lingering near the corridor. The boy's face was pale, his eyes darting nervously. Poirot, Hastings whispered. That lad looks guilty. Should we question him? Poirot nodded. Bonne idée, Hastings. Let us see what he knows. They approached Thomas, who flinched under Poirot's gaze. Monsieur, Poirot said gently, you were on duty last night, oui? Did you see anyone in this corridor after 10 p.m.? Thomas swallowed hard. I saw someone, sir. A lady, I think. It was dark, and I only caught a glimpse. She was near Sir Reginald's cabin, around 11 p.m. A lady? Poirot pressed. Can you describe her? Thomas shook his head. It was too dark, but she was wearing a light-colored dress, and she moved quickly, like she didn't want to be seen. Poirot thanked the boy and dismissed him, his expression thoughtful. A lady in a light-colored dress, he said to Hastings.
Lady Evelyn wore green at dinner. Clara wore blue. Mrs. Langley wore gray. Who, then, is our mystery woman? Back in the saloon, the guests had returned, their tension palpable. Poirot addressed them briefly. "A new clue has emerged," he said, "and it points to a presence in the corridor last night. The truth, it draws closer. But beware, the murderer watches us, even now."
Of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder. The afternoon sun cast long shadows, mirroring the lengthening doubts that plagued the guests confined aboard. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing at the rail of the upper deck, felt the weight of the case pressing upon him. The clues, the poisoned glass, the cryptic journal entries, the faint footprint, the embroidered handkerchief, and now the steward's sighting of a mysterious woman in a light-colored dress formed a labyrinth that only Hercule Poirot's meticulous mind could navigate. Yet, as Hastings watched the horizon, he sensed that the truth was beginning to surface, like a ship emerging from fog. In the dining saloon, Poirot had summoned the guests once again, his request delivered with the quiet authority that commanded obedience. The Coast Guard officers, stationed near the saloon's entrance, maintained a watchful presence, their deference to Poirot a testament to his reputation. Hastings joined his friend, noting the strained faces of the assembled company. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne sat with a fragile dignity, her eyes red but resolute, as though bracing for further revelations. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her composure a mask of steel, watched Poirot with a calculating intensity. Miss Clara Wentworth, her defiance tempered by a flicker of unease, toyed with a silver cigarette case. Julian Carver, the solicitor, stood near the window, his thin frame rigid with tension. Dr. Malcolm Fraser, his nerves frayed, seemed to shrink under the weight of suspicion, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the table. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his notebook open, his mustache a perfect arc of control. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice calm but carrying a subtle edge. "The murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne is a tapestry woven with lies. Each thread, it seems to unravel, reveals another beneath. Today we pull at these threads. For the truth, it cannot remain hidden." He turned to Dr. Fraser, whose nervous demeanor had drawn increasing scrutiny. "Doctor, you have said you gave Sir Reginald a sedative at 10:30 p.m. for indigestion, yet you did not check the glass of water on his bedside table. Why?" Fraser's face flushed, his hands trembling. I had no reason to. It was just a glass of water. I assumed it was from the steward, as usual." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Assumptions, doctor, they are dangerous. The glass contained poison, as we suspect, and you, a physician, did not notice anything amiss in Sir Reginald's demeanor." Fraser's voice cracked. He was agitated, as I said. The necklace business upset him. "But I swear, I didn't poison him." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and turned to Lady Evelyn. "Madam, your distress over the necklace is understandable, but your account of its loss is..." It lapped. "I don't know how it happened. I felt a tug, perhaps, but I was distracted. Reginald was talking about the mine, and I wasn't paying attention." Poirot's gaze softened, but only slightly. "And your sleeping draught, madame? It was taken at 9:30 p.m. You had nothing, saw nothing until morning?" "Nothing," she whispered, though her eyes darted to Mrs. Langley, who sat impassive. Poirot turned to Mrs. Langley, his tone measured. "Madame, your partnership with Sir Reginald was close, oui? Yet his journal speaks of betrayal, and an entry mentions E. Perhaps Evelyn, perhaps another. Did Sir Reginald confide in you about his fears?" Mrs. Langley's lips pressed into a thin line. "He confided little, Monsieur Poirot. Our partnership was professional. If he felt betrayed, it was not by me." "Yet you knew of the mine's risks," Poirot pressed, "and of his enemies.
Were there threats against him? Mrs. Langley hesitated, a rare crack in her composure. There were rumors. Competitors who resented his success, but nothing specific. Poirot's eyes flicked to Clara Wentworth. Mademoiselle, the handkerchief with the initial C, you deny it is yours. Yet his steward saw a woman in a light-colored dress near Sir Reginald's cabin at 11 p.m. Your dress last night, it was blue, no? But you were on the deck near the service corridor. Clara's smile was sharp, almost mocking. You're fishing, Monsieur Poirot. I told you I was alone, enjoying my brandy. I didn't sneak about in corridors, and I don't own a handkerchief with a C on it. And you, Monsieur Carver, Poirot said, turning to the solicitor. You worked late on contract for the mine. Did Sir Reginald mention any concerns about his partners, or perhaps a betrayal? Carver's thin fingers adjusted his tie. He was cautious, as always. The mine was a gamble, and he knew it. But he didn't speak of betrayal to me. Poirot closed his notebook with a snap. Merci. Your words, they are like the sea, smooth on the surface, turbulent beneath. But now, a new truth emerges. He paused, letting the silence build tension, then continued. Last night, after dinner, Sir Reginald received a visitor. Not Dr. Fraser, but another. The steward, Thomas, saw a woman in a light-colored dress near the cabin. And this morning, I found a second clue in the cabin. A single pearl, hidden beneath a rug, near the bedside table. The guests gasped, and Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her throat. A pearl, she whispered. From my necklace. No, madame, Poirot said. This pearl is not from an emerald necklace. It is smaller, plainer. It suggests he and the man.
Me on the way we stale now. Mission of their owns in table to time, and he was gone the tress. And down the meter house and in college, I don't know, tried to make the meat to Cara, Poirot, and throw in the sand, and his complete deed. He pay the world in loving guests. You will not Captain Harrow increase down that bass hit Poirot on the end of cervix stories. And it was a concrack previously wrong and appears a printings on the plants. And the world, in the English one in Holdies, I were scared to fare. It care the crew office, Poirot asking, wanting the drokes of the rose. And there had enjoyed it Poirot there. One of the moved and the pearls, Poirot's eyes twinkled. We make the off, Poirot pale. Back in the saloon, Poirot addressed the Coast Guard officers, ensuring the pearl and glass were secured for analysis. He said to Hastings, knowing Poirot's net was tightening. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The Sapphire yacht lay anchored in the English Channel, its gleaming decks bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. Yet the beauty of the scene was marred by the shadow of murder that clung to every corner. The air aboard was thick with suspicion, each guest moving with the caution of one who knows they are watched. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing on the upper deck, felt the weight of the mystery pressing upon him. The clues uncovered by Hercule Poirot, the poisoned glass, the cryptic journal entries, the faint footprint, the embroidered handkerchief, the pearl, and the steward's sighting of a woman in a light-colored dress, had woven a complex web, and Hastings sensed that a crack was about to form in the facade of one of the suspects. In the dining saloon, Poirot had gathered the guests yet again, his summons delivered with a quiet intensity that suggested a shift in the investigation. The Coast Guard officers stationed near the door maintained their vigilant presence, but it was Poirot's commanding figure that held the room's attention. Hastings joined his friend, noting the strained expressions of the assembled company. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne sat with a brittle composure, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her face a mask of calm, watched Poirot with an almost imperceptible tension in her posture. Miss Clara Wentworth, her usual defiance subdued, toyed with a bracelet on her wrist, her eyes flickering nervously. Julian Carver, the solicitor, stood near the bar, his thin frame taut as a bowstring. Dr. Malcolm Fraser, his nerves frayed to breaking, seemed on the verge of collapse, his face pale and his hands trembling. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his notebook open, his mustache impeccable despite the gravity of the moment. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice steady but laced with a new urgency. "The murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne is a crime of the heart as much as the mind. The clues, they point to motives deep and personal, greed, betrayal, perhaps love. Tonight, one of you will reveal a truth that brings us closer to the killer." He turned to Dr. Fraser, whose nervous demeanor had drawn increasing suspicion. "Doctor, you have been most agitated. You claim the sedative you gave Sir Reginald was harmless, yet he is dead. There is something you have not told us. Speak, I implore you, before the truth is forced from you." Fraser's eyes widened, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "I've told you everything. I gave him the sedative, nothing more. I'm not a murderer." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Yet the journal speaks of M and a secret too costly to keep. You are M, no? What did Sir Reginald know about you?" Fraser's face crumpled, and he buried his head in his hands. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice breaking. "Sir Reginald, he knew about my debts. I've been gambling heavily, and I borrowed money from him. He threatened to expose me, to ruin my practice, unless I paid him back. But I didn't kill him. I swear it." The confession hung in the air, a crack in the wall of lies. Hastings, watching closely, saw Lady Evelyn's eyes widen, while Mrs. Langley's expression remained unreadable. Clara Wentworth's lips twitched, as though suppressing a smile, and Carver's fingers stilled on his tie. Poirot nodded, his tone gentle but firm. "Merci, doctor. Your honesty, it is a step toward the truth. But debts, they are emotive, no? Did Sir Reginald press you for repayment last night?" Fraser shook his head, his voice barely audible. "No, he only mentioned it in passing during dinner. I told him I'd settle it soon. He seemed satisfied." Poirot turned to Lady Evelyn, whose fragile composure was fraying. "Madame, your husband knew of Dr. Fraser's debts. Did he speak of other secrets, perhaps closer to home?" Lady Evelyn's hands trembled, and she looked away. "Reginald was always secretive. He didn't share his business with me. I only knew he was worried about the mine." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the necklace, madame? Its loss distressed you greatly, yet the pearl we found in the cabin suggests another piece of jewelry. Do you own such a pearl?" Lady Evelyn's breath caught. "No. I told you my necklace was emeralds, not pearls. I don't know anything about a pearl." Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara Wentworth. "Mademoiselle, you have been most elusive. The handkerchief with the initial C, you deny it is yours. Yet the steward saw a woman in a light-colored dress near Sir Reginald's cabin, and now a pearl, perhaps from a bracelet." He glanced pointedly at the bracelet on her wrist, a delicate chain adorned with small pearls. Clara's face hardened, but her voice was steady. "You're grasping, Monsieur Poirot. That pearl could belong to anyone. And my dress last night was blue, not light-colored. You have nothing on me." Poirot smiled faintly. "We shall see, mademoiselle. The truth, it is like a pearl itself, small, but it shines." He turned to Mrs. Langley. "Madame, you were Sir Reginald's partner in the diamond mine venture. His journal mentions E and a betrayal. Did he suspect you? Or perhaps another?" Mrs. Langley's composure held, but her eyes flickered. "As I said, our partnership was professional. If he suspected betrayal, it was not from me. Perhaps he meant Evelyn or someone else." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, then moved to Carver. "Monsieur Carver, your notebook with a snap. Merci. Your words, They reveal much, and yet they conceal more. But now, a truth has surfaced. Dr. Fraser's debts. This is a crack in the facade, and others will follow. He dismissed the guests, asking Captain Harrow to ensure they remained accessible. As they dispersed, Hastings followed Poirot to the service corridor, where the detective knelt to examine the footprint once more. "The pearl, the handkerchief, the woman in the light-colored dress," Poirot murmured. "They point to a presence, but not yet a person." Hastings, eager to contribute, ventured a theory. Fraser's confession. Could he have killed Sir Reginald to silence him about the debts? Poirot shook his head. Possible, but unlikely. His fear is genuine, not the guilt of a murderer. The killer is colder, more calculated. We must look to the heart of the motive. They returned to Sir Reginald's cabin, where Poirot examined the bedside table again. The faint scratch on the wood where the pearl had been found suggested movement. A chair, perhaps, or a struggle. Poirot opened the journal, flipping to a new entry, dated the day before the voyage. "The emerald hides the key. I must act before it is too late." Hastings frowned. "The emerald again. Is it the necklace, or something else?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The necklace. It is a symbol, Hastings. It represents something Sir Reginald valued, or feared. We must find it." As they left the cabin, Hastings noticed the steward, Thomas, lingering nearby, his face pale. Poirot beckoned him over. "Monsieur Thomas, you saw the woman in the light-colored dress. Was there anything else? Her manner, her speed?" Thomas swallowed. "She was tall, sir, and she moved quickly, like she was afraid of being seen. I thought she might have been carrying something, but I couldn't tell." Poirot thanked him and turned to Hastings. "A woman, tall and dark-haired, carrying something. This is no coincidence. The net tightens, mon ami." Back in the saloon, Poirot addressed the Coast Guard officers, ensuring the pearl and glass were prepared for forensic analysis. "The truth," he said to Hastings. "It is close. Dr. Fraser's confession is but the first crack. The murderer feels the pressure, and they will make a mistake." Hastings felt a surge of excitement, tempered by unease. The Sapphire yacht was a crucible of secrets, and Poirot's relentless pursuit was about to force another truth to the surface. Chapter 9. The Trap. The Sapphire yacht lay still in the fading light of the English Channel, its polished decks reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. The air aboard was thick with anticipation, as though the vessel itself sensed the climax approaching. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing at the rail of the upper deck, felt a knot of tension in his chest. The clues uncovered by Hercule Poirot, the poisoned glass, the cryptic journal entries, the faint footprint, the embroidered handkerchief, the pearl, and the steward's sighting of a woman in a light-colored dress had tightened the noose around the suspects. Dr. Malcolm Fraser's confession about his gambling debts had cracked the facade of civility, and Hastings knew Poirot was preparing to spring a trap to force the murderer's hand. In the dining saloon, Poirot had gathered the guests for what he described as a final reckoning before the Coast Guard takes charge. The room, once a haven of luxury, now felt like a courtroom, with Poirot as the unrelenting judge. Hastings joined his friend, noting the palpable unease among the suspects. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne sat with a fragile resolve, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes darting nervously. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her composure a mask of steel, watched Poirot with a guarded intensity. Miss Clara Wentworth, her defiance waning, clutched her pearl bracelet, her fingers betraying a slight tremor. Julian Carver, the solicitor, stood near the bar, his thin face taut with apprehension. Dr. Fraser, his confession still raw, seemed on the verge of collapse, his eyes fixed on the floor. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small frame radiating authority, his notebook open before him. His mustache, impeccably waxed, framed a face alight with purpose. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice calm but carrying a weight that silenced the room. "The murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne is a crime of cunning, but no criminal, however clever, can escape the logic of Hercule Poirot. Tonight, we set a trap, for the murderer is among us, and they will reveal themselves." He paused, letting the words settle, his eyes sweeping the room. The clues, they are many. The poisoned glass, the journal entries, the footprint, the handkerchief with the initial C, the pearl, the woman in the light-colored dress. But it is the motive that binds them. Sir Reginald knew of a betrayal, and he died for it. Let us test the waters. He turned to Lady Evelyn, whose pale face, "Your necklace, but from another piece of jewelry. Do you recognize it?" Lady Evelyn shook her head, her eyes wide.
"No, I don't own any pearl jewelry. It's not mine."
Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara Wentworth. "Mademoiselle, your bracelet. It is adorned with pearls, no? One is missing, perhaps?" Clara's hand instinctively covered the bracelet, her eyes narrowing. "You're reaching, Monsieur Poirot. My bracelet is intact, and I've said that handkerchief isn't mine. You're trying to pin this on me, but you have no proof." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Proof, mademoiselle, is in the details. The steward saw a woman in a light-colored dress near Sir Reginald's cabin at 11 p.m. Your dress was blue, you say, but dresses, they can be changed." Clara's face hardened, but she said nothing. Poirot turned to Mrs. Langley. "Madam, your partnership with Sir Reginald was close. His journal mentions E and a betrayal. Was it you he suspected, or another?" Mrs. Langley's composure held, but her voice was clipped. "I've told you our partnership was professional. If he suspected betrayal, it was not from me. Perhaps Evelyn, or someone outside our circle." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And you, Monsieur Carver," he said, turning to the solicitor. "You reviewed contracts for the mine. Did Sir Reginald share any fears about his partners, or perhaps a document that might expose a secret?" Carver's thin fingers adjusted his tie. "He was cautious, as I said. The contracts were standard, but he was concerned about leaks. He mentioned a rival company, nothing more." Poirot nodded, then turned to Dr. Fraser. "Doctor, your confession about your debts has been most illuminating. Sir Reginald knew, and he threatened to expose you. Did he demand payment last night?" Fraser's voice was barely audible. "No. He mentioned it at dinner, but he didn't press. I told him I'd pay soon. He seemed satisfied." Poirot closed his notebook with a deliberate snap. "Merci. Your words, they are like the tide, ebbing and flowing, but always revealing. Now, let us set the trap." He paused, his eyes locking on each guest in turn. "Tonight, I have instructed Captain Harrow to place a decoy, an object resembling the emerald necklace, in the saloon, under guard. The murderer, they seek this necklace, for it holds a secret. I believe they will try to retrieve it, and when they do, we will have them." The guests gasped, their faces a gallery of shock and suspicion. Lady Evelyn's hands flew to her mouth, while Mrs. Langley's Hastings followed Poirot to the saloon's bar, where Captain Harrow was placing a velvet box containing a replica necklace. The real necklace, still missing, was the key to the mystery.
and Hastings knew Poirot's trap was a calculated risk.
"Poirot," Hastings whispered, "do you really think the murderer will take the bait? It's bold, even for you."
Poirot's eyes twinkled.
"Mon ami, the murderer is desperate. The necklace, it is not merely a jewel. It is a symbol of their motive. They will act, and we will be ready."
They moved to a shadowed corner of the saloon, where Poirot had arranged for a discreet vantage point. The Coast Guard officers took their positions, their presence subtle but vigilant. Hastings, his heart pounding, watched the velvet box, its green stones glinting in the chandelier's light. Hours passed, the yacht silent save for the creak of wood and the lapping of waves. Then, just past midnight, a figure appeared in the saloon's doorway. A woman, tall and dark-haired, dressed in a light-colored shawl. She moved swiftly toward the bar, her hands reaching for the velvet box. Poirot's hand gripped Hastings' arm, his voice a whisper.
"Observe, Hastings. The trap, it springs."
The woman froze as the Coast Guard officers emerged, their lanterns illuminating her face. It was Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her composure shattered, her eyes wide with panic. I wasn't stealing it," she stammered. "I thought it was mine, a keepsake from Reginald." Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but unrelenting.
"Madame Langley, you were seen near Sir Reginald's cabin last night, in a light-colored dress. The pearl, it is from your earring, no? And the necklace, you know its true value."
Mrs. Langley's face crumpled, and she sank into a chair, her hands covering her face.
"I didn't kill him," she whispered. "I swear it. I only wanted to protect myself."
Poirot's eyes softened, but his resolve held.
"Protect yourself, madame? From what?
Speak, and the truth may yet save you." Mrs. Langley's voice was barely audible.
"The necklace. It contains a document hidden in the clasp. Reginald used it to store proof of a fraud, a scheme to inflate the mine's value. He was going to expose me, ruin me. I took it, yes, but I didn't kill him."
The room was silent, the weight of her confession hanging heavy. Hastings, stunned, looked to Poirot, whose expression was unreadable. The trap had worked, but the truth was still incomplete.
"Madame," Poirot said, "your words, they are a step toward the light. But the murder, it remains unsolved."
Decks shrouded in the darkness of night, the trap set by Hercule Poirot had ensnared Mrs. Beatrice Langley, whose confession about the emerald necklace and its hidden document had sent ripples of shock through the guests. Yet, the murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne remained unsolved, and Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the shadowed corner of the dining saloon, felt a surge of anticipation. Poirot's relentless logic had brought them to the brink of truth, and Hastings knew the little Belgian detective was about to unveil the killer in a manner as dramatic as it was precise. The saloon was dimly lit, the chandeliers casting a soft glow over the assembled company. The Coast Guard officers stood by the door, their presence a silent reminder of the gravity of the moment. Poirot had summoned the guests for what he called the final act, and the air was thick with tension. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne sat with a ghostly pallor, her hands clutching a handkerchief as though it were a lifeline. Miss Clara Wentworth, her defiance replaced by a wary alertness, toyed with her pearl bracelet, her eyes fixed on Poirot. Julian Carver, the solicitor, stood near the bar, his thin frame rigid with unease. Dr. Malcolm Fraser, his confession about his debts still raw, seemed to shrink into his chair, his face a mask of dread. Mrs. Langley, under the Coast Guard's watch, sat apart, her composure shattered, her eyes red-rimmed but defiant. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small figure radiating an authority that silenced the room. His notebook lay closed before him, a symbol of the completed puzzle. His mustache, impeccably waxed, framed a face alight with the quiet triumph of a man who has seen the truth. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice steady and commanding, "the murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne is a crime of cunning, but no crime can withstand the scrutiny of Hercule Poirot's little gray cells. Tonight I reveal the killer, and the tapestry of lies will unravel." He paused, letting the silence build, his eyes sweeping the room. "Let us reconstruct the night of the murder, step by step, for the clues, they tell a story. The poisoned glass, the journal entries, the footprint, the handkerchief, the pearl, the woman in the light-colored dress, and the necklace. These are the threads of our tapestry." He turned to Lady Evelyn, whose fragile composure wavered. "Madame, your necklace was stolen, you say, during dinner. Yet no one saw it fall, and you felt only a tug. This was no theft by chance, it was deliberate. A distraction to set the stage for murder." Lady Evelyn's voice trembled. "I told you it was taken. I didn't kill Reginald." Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. "Patience, madame. Let us proceed. The journal entries. The truth will out. I know who betrayed me. E knows more."
Lies in the emerald necklace, which Madame Langley has admitted, holds a document proving a fraud in the diamond mine venture. Mrs. Langley's head snapped up, her voice sharp. "I took the necklace to protect myself, not to kill him. I told you I'm innocent." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Oui, madame. But your confession, it is incomplete. Let us examine the night of the murder. At 10:30 p.m., Dr. Fraser visited Sir Reginald, giving him a sedative for indigestion. The glass of water was on the bedside table, untouched. At 11 p.m., the steward Thomas saw a woman in a light-colored dress near the cabin. Later, Sir Reginald drank from the glass, which contained poison, likely strychnine, given the symptoms of convulsions and blue lips. He turned to Dr. Fraser. "Doctor, your debts made you a suspect, but your fear is genuine. You did not poison the glass, for you had no opportunity after 10:30 p.m. But someone did." Fraser's voice was barely audible. "I swear, I only gave him the sedative." Poirot nodded, then turned to Clara Wentworth. "Mademoiselle, the handkerchief with the initials C was found in the service corridor, near the footprint of a woman's shoe. You deny it is yours, yet your bracelet is missing a pearl, the same pearl found in the cabin." Clara's face hardened, her fingers tightening on the bracelet. "You're wrong, Monsieur Poirot. That pearl could belong to anyone, and I was in my cabin, not sneaking about corridors." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "We shall see, but first let us consider the trap. Last night, Madame Langley attempted to take the decoy necklace, believing it held the document that could ruin her. Yet the real necklace remains missing, and the document with it." He turned to Carver. "Monsieur Carver, you reviewed contracts for the mine. You knew of the fraud, no? And you knew Sir Reginald planned to expose it." Carver's thin lips pressed into a line. "I knew the contracts were complex, but I had no knowledge of fraud. Sir Reginald was secretive, even with me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, you were seen speaking with Madame Langley last night, after the trap was set. A coincidence, perhaps?" Carver's face paled, but he said nothing. Poirot turned to the room, his voice rising. "The murderer is here, and they are clever. They poisoned the glass, knowing Sir Reginald would drink. They left the handkerchief to implicate Mademoiselle Wentworth. They dropped the pearl, perhaps unintentionally, from a piece of jewelry. And they stole the necklace, knowing its secret." He paused, his gaze locking on Lady Evelyn. "Madame—" "I loved him! I didn't kill him!" Yes, he knew about a mistake in my past, but I didn't poison him.
Poirot's voice softened, but his eyes were relentless. Yet you are seen, madame, in a light-colored shawl near the cabin at 11 p.m. The steward mistook it for a dress, but it was your shawl, no? You entered the cabin, you poisoned the glass, and you took the necklace to protect your secret. The room erupted in gasps. Lady Evelyn's sobs grew louder, and she shook her head violently.
No, I went to his cabin, yes, to beg him not to expose me. But he was alive when I left. I took the necklace, yes, but only because he said it held proof of my past. A letter hidden in the clasp. I didn't poison him!
Poirot's expression was unreadable. And yet the pearl is yours, madame. It fell from your earring, a pearl earring you wore last night, hidden beneath your hair. The footprint matches your shoe. And the poison? It was in the glass you knew he would drink. Lady Evelyn collapsed, her sobs racking her frame.
I didn't do it, I swear!
Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. The truth, it is clear. Lady Evelyn, you loved Sir Reginald, but you feared him. His threats drove you to desperation. You poisoned the glass, you took the necklace, and you left the handkerchief to implicate Mademoiselle Wentworth, knowing her reputation for boldness. Clara Wentworth's eyes widened.
You're mad! She couldn't have!
Poirot turned to her. Mademoiselle, you are innocent of murder, but not of suspicion. The handkerchief was a clever misdirection, but the pearl betrays the truth. He addressed the room. The murder was planned with care. Lady Evelyn entered the cabin, poisoned the glass, and took the necklace. She dropped the pearl in her haste, and the footprint marks her path. The journal's warnings, the fraud, the debts, they were distractions. But the heart of the crime is personal. Lady Evelyn's voice was a whisper.
I didn't. I couldn't.
Poirot's gaze softened. Madame, the little grey cells do not lie. You will face justice, but you may yet find peace in truth. The Coast Guard officers moved forward, gently restraining Lady Evelyn as she wept. The guests sat in stunned silence, the weight of the reveal settling over them. Hastings, his heart heavy, looked to Poirot, whose face held a trace of sadness. The trap, Poirot said softly to Hastings. It was not the necklace, but the pressure of guilt. The murderer could not resist confessing. As Lady Evelyn was led away, the sapphire yacht seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. The truth had been found, but at a cost. Chapter 11.
The shock wave through the guests, leaving them silent and subdued as the Coast Guard prepared to escort her to shore. The opulent vessel, once a stage for luxury and intrigue, felt hollow, its grandeur diminished by the tragedy that had unfolded. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing at the rail of the upper deck, gazed at the starlit sea, his heart heavy with the outcome. Hercule Poirot, the master of logic and observation, had unraveled the mystery with his characteristic brilliance, but the victory was tinged with melancholy. In the dining saloon, the guests had dispersed to their cabins, their faces etched with a mix of relief and unease. Lady Evelyn, now under the watchful eye of the Coast Guard officers, had been moved to a secure cabin, her sobs echoing faintly through the corridors. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her own confession about the emerald necklace's hidden document still fresh, sat alone in the saloon, her composure restored, but her eyes distant. Miss Clara Wentworth, cleared of suspicion, had retreated with a cigarette and a glass of brandy, her defiance replaced by quiet reflection. Julian Carver, the solicitor, had returned to his papers, as though seeking solace in routine. Dr. Malcolm Fraser, his debts exposed but his innocence affirmed, seemed to shrink further into himself, haunted by the ordeal. Hercule Poirot, ever the meticulous figure, stood beside Hastings on the deck, his small frame silhouetted against the moonlight. His mustache was impeccable, his eyes bright with the satisfaction of a puzzle solved, yet there was a trace of sadness in his expression. Hastings, accustomed to Poirot's reflective moments after a case, waited for the inevitable summation. The little Belgian's habit of sharing his philosophy on human nature and justice. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, breaking the silence. "You were brilliant, as always, but I can't help feeling sorry for Lady Evelyn. She seems so fragile, so desperate." "Do you think she truly meant to kill him?" Poirot turned, his eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "Mon ami, the heart of a crime is often a tragedy. Lady Evelyn, she was driven by fear, fear of her past, fear of exposure. The emerald necklace, it was not merely a jewel, but a symbol of her shame. Sir Reginald, he used it to control her, and in her desperation, she turned to murder. It is a sad tale, but the truth, it must always prevail." Hastings nodded, though his mind replayed the dramatic scene in the saloon. Poirot's trap, the decoy necklace, had pressured Mrs. Langley into revealing her part in the fraud, but it was Lady Evelyn's collapse under his relentless questioning that had sealed the case. The pearl, the footprint, twitched in a faint smile. "Précisément, Hastings. The handkerchief, it was a stroke of cunning. Lady Evelyn, she knew Mademoiselle Wentworth's reputation for boldness would make her a plausible suspect. But the pearl, it was her mistake, dropped in haste. It betrayed her. The little gray cells, they see through such deceptions." Hastings glanced at the sea, its surface calm but hiding depths unknown. And the journal entries, E for Evelyn, C for Clara, M for Malcolm, they were all distractions then? "Not distractions, mon ami, but truths twisted to conceal," Poirot replied. Sir Reginald, he was a man of secrets. He suspected many: his wife's past, Madame Langley's fraud, Dr. Fraser's debts. His journal was a map of his fears, but it was Lady Evelyn who acted. The poison, it was strychnine, administered in the glass of water she knew he would drink. The necklace, it held the letter of her scandal, and she took it to protect herself. Hastings shook his head, marveling at Poirot's clarity. "You saw it all from the start, didn't you? The way you pressed her, the way you set the trap, it was masterful." Poirot's eyes softened. "Not from the start, Hastings. The little gray cells, they work methodically. The footprint, the pearl, the steward's sighting, they were pieces of a puzzle. But it was the heart of Lady Evelyn, her fear, her guilt, that revealed the whole. The trap, it was not only the necklace, but the pressure of her own conscience." The deck was silent, save for the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. Hastings thought of the guests, each carrying their own burdens. Mrs. Langley's fraud, Dr. Fraser's debts, Clara's defiance, Carver's secrecy. "What happens now, Poirot?" he asked. "The Coast Guard will take Lady Evelyn, but what of the others?" Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Madame Langley, she will face justice for her fraud, though it is a lesser crime. Dr. Fraser, he must confront his debts, but he is free of murder. Mademoiselle Wentworth and Monsieur Carver, they are innocent of this crime, though their secrets they will carry. The sapphire yacht, it is a microcosm of life, ambition, betrayal, love, all intertwined." Hastings felt a pang of sympathy for Lady Evelyn, despite her guilt. She loved him. In her way, didn't she? To go to such lengths. "Oui," Poirot said softly. "Love, It is a powerful force, but it can twist into desperation. Lady Evelyn. She loved Sir Reginald, but she feared him more. It is a tragedy of the human heart. The Coast Guard's launch was visible now. Poirot's restless mind. You'll never stop, will you? Always chasing the next mystery. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The little gray cells, they do not rest. But for tonight, we enjoyed the peace of a case solved. Come, Hastings, let us retire. The sea, it is calm, and we have earned our rest. They descended to the saloon, where Captain Harrow awaited with a report. The Coast Guard had secured Lady Evelyn's cabin, and the evidence, the glass, the pearl, the handkerchief, had been catalogued for the coroner. Mrs. Langley, under scrutiny for her role in the fraud, had agreed to cooperate with the authorities. The other guests, cleared of murder, were preparing to disembark once the yacht reached shore. As Poirot and Hastings made their way to their cabins, Hastings paused. Poirot, do you ever wonder if we could have stopped it, if we'd seen the signs earlier? Poirot's expression was thoughtful. The past, it cannot be changed, Hastings, but the truth, it prevents further harm. Lady Evelyn's crime, it was born of fear, but her confession, it frees others. We do what we can, and that is enough. In his cabin, Hastings lay awake, the events of the voyage replaying in his mind. The Sapphire yacht had been a stage for drama, as Poirot had predicted, and the little Belgian had played his role to perfection. The clues, the lies, the confessions, all had led to this moment, and Hastings felt a quiet pride in being part of it. As the yacht rocked gently beneath him, Hastings drifted to sleep. The sound of the sea a reminder of the depths Poirot had plumbed to find the truth. The Sapphire yacht would sail on, but its secrets were no longer hidden, thanks to the brilliance of Hercule Poirot. Word count, 1980. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The Sapphire yacht gleamed under the pale light of dawn, its polished hull cutting through the gentle waves of the English Channel as it prepared to return to the Devon coast. The air aboard was heavy with the aftermath of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder, the revelation of Lady Evelyn as the killer, having left the guests in a state of quiet shock. The opulent vessel, once a symbol of wealth and leisure, now felt like a gilded cage, its corridors echoing with the weight of exposed secrets. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing at the starboard rail, watched the horizon, his mind tangled with the events of the past days. Hercule Poirot's brilliance had unraveled the mystery, but the resolution brought little comfort, only a sobering reminder of human frailty. The dining coffee with a forced nonchalance, her pearl bracelet glinting in the morning light. Julian Carver, the solicitor, maintained his usual reserve, his thin fingers leafing through a notebook as if to anchor himself in routine. Dr. Malcolm Fraser, his gambling debts now public, sat apart, his face pale and drawn, as though the weight of his shame lingered. Lady Evelyn, confined to a secure cabin under Coast Guard supervision, was absent, her absence a palpable void in the room. Hercule Poirot entered the saloon with his characteristic precision, his small frame impeccable in a tailored suit, his mustache a perfect arc of control. Hastings, seated near the window, watched his friend with admiration. Poirot's ability to navigate the labyrinth of human motives, greed, fear, love, had brought justice to Sir Reginald's murder, but Hastings knew the little Belgian was not yet finished. There was always one final act, a moment where Poirot would reflect on the case and its deeper truths. Poirot took his place at the head of the table, declining the offered breakfast with a polite wave. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. "The tragedy of Sir Reginald Ashbourne is resolved, yet its echoes remain. The truth, it has been found, but it leaves us with questions, not of guilt, but of the human heart." Mrs. Langley looked up, her expression guarded. "Monsieur Poirot, you've done your work admirably, but what now? The yacht will dock and we'll all scatter. Will this ordeal simply fade?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Madame, the truth does not fade. It lingers like a shadow. You, with your knowledge of the mind's fraud, will face the consequences, though they are less than murder. But the heart, it carries its own burdens." Clara Wentworth set down her coffee cup with a sharp clink. "You're awfully poetic, Monsieur Poirot. I'm just glad to be out of your crosshairs. That handkerchief business was a nasty trick." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Mademoiselle, the handkerchief was indeed a trick, but not of my making. Lady Evelyn, she chose you as a scapegoat, knowing your boldness would draw suspicion. But the pearl, it was her undoing, a detail she could not foresee." Carver, his voice clipped, spoke up. "And the contracts? I've been thinking, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Reginald's concerns about leaks? Could they have been a factor in his murder?" Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "A perceptive question, Monsieur Carver. Sir Reginald's fears of betrayal were many, and the contracts, they were part of
Can mask strength, and desperation can drive even the gentlest soul to crime. Lady Evelyn loved her husband, but she feared him more. The poison, it was her escape from his control." Hastings, listening intently, felt a pang of sympathy for Lady Evelyn, despite her guilt. "Poirot," he said, leaning closer, "you mentioned her past as an actress. What was the scandal she feared so much?" Poirot's eyes met his, a flicker of sadness within them. "Mon ami, the details, they are not for us to dwell upon. A scandal from her youth, a liaison perhaps, or a deception that would have ruined her in Sir Reginald's world. The letter in the necklace, it was proof, and he held it over her. She killed to protect herself, but in doing so, she lost everything." The saloon fell silent, the guests absorbing Poirot's words. Hastings glanced at Mrs. Langley, whose role in the fraud had been a secondary crime, and wondered if she, too, felt the weight of her choices. Clara Wentworth, her defiance softened, looked almost pensive, as though the case had stirred something within her. Carver and Fraser, each grappling with their own secrets, seemed subdued, their earlier tensions replaced by a quiet resignation. Captain Harrow entered, his grizzled face somber. "Monsieur Poirot, the Coast Guard reports the launch is ready to take Lady Evelyn to shore. The coroner awaits. And the evidence, the glass, the pearl, the handkerchief, has been secured." Poirot nodded. "Merci, Capitaine. The sapphire yacht has played its part, and now it is time for justice to proceed." As the guests prepared to disembark, Poirot and Hastings stepped onto the deck, the morning air crisp and bracing. The yacht was moving slowly toward the coast, its engines a low hum beneath their feet. Hastings looked to his friend, sensing the moment for one of Poirot's philosophical reflections. "Poirot," he said, "this case, it's left me uneasy. Lady Evelyn's crime was terrible, but I can't help feeling there's more we could have done. If we'd known her fear, could we have stopped her?" Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his gaze fixed on the approaching shore. Hastings, the human heart,
It is a mystery even I cannot fully unravel. We see the signs, the tears, the glances, the lies, but we cannot always prevent the act. Lady Evelyn chose her path, and we brought the truth to light. That is our duty. Hastings nodded, though the weight of the case lingered. And the others, Mrs. Langley, Fraser, Clara, Carver, they'll carry this with them, won't they? We, Poirot said softly. Each has their burden. Madame Langley, her ambition led to fraud. Dr. Fraser felt a sense of closure, but also a lingering sadness. You always say the truth sets us free, Poirot, but it doesn't feel that way this time. Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his expression was somber. The truth, mon ami, it is not always freedom. Sometimes it is a chain, binding us to our actions, but it is necessary. Without it, we are lost in the fog of lies. As the yacht docked, the guests gathered their belongings, their faces a mix of relief and weariness. Poirot and Hastings stood apart, watching as Lady Evelyn was led to the Coast Guard launch, her figure small and broken. Mrs. Langley followed, escorted for questioning about the fraud. The others, Clara, Carver, Fraser, boarded a separate launch, their futures uncertain but free of the murder's shadow. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice quiet. Come, mon ami. The Sapphire Yacht has told its story, and we must move on. There are other puzzles, other truths awaiting Hercule Poirot. Hastings smiled, the familiar spark of adventure rekindling. The Sapphire Yacht faded behind them, its secrets laid bare, but the world, as Poirot knew, was full of mysteries yet to be solved. Chapter 13. The Shadows of Suspicion. The Sapphire Yacht rested at the Devon dock, its once pristine decks, now a silent testament to the tragedy that had unfolded aboard. The morning sun cast a gentle glow over the harbor, but the air was heavy with the aftermath of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder and Lady Evelyn's confession. The Coast Guard had taken her into custody, and Mrs. Beatrice Langley faced questioning for her role in the diamond mine fraud. The remaining guests, Miss Clara Wentworth, Julian Carver, and Dr. Malcolm Fraser, prepared to disembark, their faces etched with the strain of the ordeal. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing on the dock, felt a mix of relief and unease, the case resolved, but its echoes lingering. Hercule Poirot, ever the master of observation, stood beside him, his sharp eyes scanning the scene as though seeking one final clue. The harbor bustled with activity, sailors securing the yacht, Coast Guard officers coordinating with local police, and curious onlookers whispering about the scandal that had erupted aboard the Sapphire Yacht. Hastings watched as the guests gathered their belongings, each moving with a cautious deliberation, as though the weight of suspicion still clung to them. Clara Wentworth, her usual defiance tempered by the case's intensity, adjusted her hat with a practiced elegance, her pearl bracelet catching the light. Julian Carr, weight of reflection. The Sapphire Yacht has played its part, and the truth has been found. Yet the human heart, it carries its scars long after justice is served. Hastings nodded, his thoughts drifting to Lady Evelyn's tearful confession. It's hard to believe she could do it, Poirot. She seemed so fragile, so broken. But you saw through it all. The pearl, the footprint, the poisoned glass. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The little gray cells, Hastings. They see what the heart conceals. Lady Evelyn. She was driven by fear, a fear so great it turned love to desperation. The necklace, with its hidden letter, was her prison, and Sir Reginald, her jailer. The murder, it was her escape, but at what cost? They walked toward the harbor's edge, where the guests were preparing to board a motor car to the train station. Clara Wentworth approached, her expression a mix of wariness and grudging respect.
Monsieur Poirot,
She said, her voice sharp but softened.
you've made quite a spectacle of us all. I suppose I should thank you for clearing my name, though that handkerchief business was a dirty trick.
Poirot bowed slightly, his smile enigmatic. Mademoiselle, the handkerchief was not my doing, but Lady Evelyn's. She chose you as a decoy, knowing your boldness would draw eyes. But the truth, it cannot be hidden from Hercule Poirot.
Clara's lips twitched, almost a smile. You're a clever little man, I'll give you that. But I'm glad to be off this wretched yacht. She turned away, her heels clicking on the dock as she joined the others. Julian Carver approached next, his face taut with the strain of the past days. Monsieur Poirot, I must thank you. Your clarity saved us from further suspicion. But Sir Reginald's contracts, there's still work to be done, isn't there? Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly.
Monsieur Carver, the contracts, they were a backdrop to a deeper drama. The fraud, it will be investigated, but your role, it was peripheral. Be cautious, however. The secrets of the Sapphire Yacht may yet have consequences.
Carver nodded, his expression unreadable, and moved to join the motor car. Dr. Fraser lingered, his hands fidgeting nervously. Monsieur Poirot, he said, his voice low, I know I've made mistakes, my debts, my weakness, but I didn't kill him. Thank you for seeing that. Poirot's gaze softened.
Doctor, the heart, it falters, but it can mend. Your debts, they are a burden, but not a crime. Face them, and you may yet find peace. Mademoiselle Wentworth's pride, Monsieur Carver's secrecy, and Lady Evelyn's fear. Each carries a shadow, but the truth, it sets them free, even if it pains. They turned back to the yacht where Captain Harrow was overseeing the final preparations for its return to storage. The Coast Guard officers had departed with Lady Evelyn and Mrs. Langley. The evidence, the glass, the pearl, the handkerchief, securely catalogued for the coroner's inquest. Hastings felt a sense of closure, but also a lingering question. Poirot, he said, the necklace, do you think it'll ever be found? That letter, it was so important to Lady Evelyn. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The necklace, mon ami, it is likely hidden aboard, or perhaps discarded in her panic. The letter, it was her motive, but its contents, they are no longer a threat. The truth is known, and the necklace, it is but a relic now. They walked along the dock, the yacht receding behind them. Hastings thought of the journal entries. The truth will out. I know who betrayed me. E knows more than she admits. C is too bold. M knows my secret. And marveled at how Poirot had pieced them together. You knew it was Lady Evelyn all along, didn't you? He asked. From the moment you saw the pearl? Poirot shook his head. Not all along, Hastings. The pearl, it was a clue, but the heart of the matter was Lady Evelyn's fear. Her tears, her glances, her desperation, they spoke louder than the evidence. The little gray cells, they listened to such things. The motor car carrying the guests pulled away, its engine a low rumble as it headed for the train station. Poirot and Hastings followed at a leisurely pace, their own departure imminent. The harbor was quiet now. The onlookers dispersed, leaving only the sound of gulls and the lapping of waves. Poirot, Hastings said, this case, it's one of your finest, isn't it?
The way you unraveled it, step by step, with no loose ends. Poirot's smile was modest, but his eyes sparkled. Mon ami, each case, it is a challenge, a puzzle to be solved. The Sapphire Yacht, it was a stage, and we played our parts. But there are always more stages, more puzzles awaiting Hercule Poirot. They reached the station, where a train waited to carry them back to London. Hastings felt a familiar thrill at the thought of their next adventure, but also a quiet satisfaction in the justice served. You're never satisfied, are you, Poirot? Always looking for the next mystery? Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The world, Hastings, it is full of mysteries, and the human heart, it is the greatest of them all. We solve one, and another appears. But for now, we rest, and we reflect on the true
Clues, the confessions, the trap. Poirot beside him closed his eyes, a faint smile on his lips, already anticipating the next challenge. The train pulled away, carrying them from the shadows of suspicion into the light of a new day. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The train to London hummed steadily through the English countryside, its rhythmic clatter a soothing counterpoint to the turmoil that had unfolded aboard the Sapphire Yacht. The Devon coast, with its tragic secrets, receded into memory as Captain Arthur Hastings gazed out the window, the rolling hills blurring past. The murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne, solved by Hercule Poirot's relentless logic, had left a mark on all who had been aboard, and Hastings felt the weight of the case lingering in his mind. Lady Evelyn's confession, the exposure of Mrs. Langley's fraud, the revelations of Dr. Fraser's debts, all had been laid bare, yet Hastings sensed that Poirot had one final reflection to share, a last knot to untie before the case could truly be closed. Poirot sat across from him in their private compartment, his small frame immaculate in a tailored suit, his mustache a perfect arc of precision. His eyes, bright and thoughtful, were fixed on a small notebook in his lap, though he had not written in it since boarding. Hastings knew this pose. Poirot was not merely resting, but turning over the case in his mind, ensuring no detail had been overlooked. The little Belgian's love of order and method was as much a part of him as his meticulous appearance, and Hastings waited for the inevitable moment when Poirot would share his final thoughts. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, breaking the silence. "It's over, isn't it? Lady Evelyn's in custody, the evidence is with the coroner, and the others are free to face their own demons. Yet you seem unsettled." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile, his eyes meeting Hastings. "Mon ami, you are observant, as always. The case of the Sapphire Yacht. It is solved. The murderer is found, the motive clear. Yet there are threads, small but significant, that linger. The mind of Hercule Poirot, it seeks the perfect symmetry, and so we reflect." Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. "Threads? You mean the necklace? It's still missing, isn't it? Or is there something else we missed?" Poirot closed his notebook with a deliberate snap, his expression thoughtful. "The necklace, it is a loose thread, but not the only one. Let us review, Hastings, for the sake of clarity. Sir Reginald Ashbourne was poisoned with strychnine, administered in a glass of water.
Right. If the letter was proof of her scandal, why keep it? She could have burned it or thrown it overboard."
"Précisément," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming.
The letter. It was her motive, but also her weakness. She took the necklace to protect herself, yet she could not bring herself to destroy it. Why? Because it was not only a scandal, but a connection to her past, a memory, perhaps, of a love she could not let go. Hastings sat back, stunned. You mean the scandal wasn't just a mistake? It was something deeper. Poirot nodded. The letter, I suspect, was from a man in her youth, before Sir Reginald. A love affair, forbidden and dangerous, that threatened her place in society. Sir Reginald discovered it and used it to control her. She killed to escape his hold, but the letter, it held her heart. The train's whistle sounded, signaling their approach to a station. Hastings glanced out the window, then back at Poirot. But the necklace itself, do you think the police will find it? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The police, they are thorough. But the sea, it is vast. Lady Evelyn, in her panic, may have hidden it aboard or cast it into the waves. The Coast Guard searches, but I suspect it is lost. The letter, however, is no longer a threat. Her confession has made it irrelevant. Hastings thought of the guests left behind. Clara Wentworth, Julian Carver, Dr. Fraser, and Mrs. Langley. One of the others, Poirot. Mrs. Langley's fraud, Fraser's debts, will they face justice? Poirot clasped his hands, his gaze distant. Madame Langley, she will answer for her part in the mine's fraud. The authorities, they have her confession and the contracts. Dr. Fraser, his debts are a private shame, but he is free of murder. Mademoiselle Wentworth and Monsieur Carver, they return to their lives. But the Sapphire Yacht, it has changed them. Suspicion, it leaves a mark, even on the innocent. The train slowed, the platform of a small station coming into view. Hastings felt a pang of melancholy, the case's resolution bittersweet. It's a grim business, Poirot. Lady Evelyn, she loved him, in her way, didn't she? Oui, Poirot said softly. Love, it is a paradox. It lifts the heart, yet it can drive us to darkness. Lady Evelyn loved Sir Reginald, but his cruelty, his use of her past, turned that game of strategy. But life, it is a game of the heart. The clues, they were pieces on the board, but it was Lady Evelyn's guilt that moved them. The little gray cells, they see the pattern, but they also feel the truth. The train pulled into London, the bustle of the station a stark contrast to the quiet of the yacht. Poirot and Hastings gathered their belongings, stepping onto the platform. The city's energy enveloped them, a reminder of the world beyond the Sapphire Yacht. Hastings glanced at Poirot, who seemed invigorated by their return. What now, Poirot? Hastings asked. Back to your flat, a cup of tisane and a rest? Poirot's smile was mischievous. Rest, Hastings. No, the world does not rest, and neither do the little gray cells. There are always mysteries, waiting to be solved. But for tonight, oui, a tisane, and perhaps a moment to reflect on the order of justice. They hailed a cab, the city's lights casting a warm glow over the streets. Hastings thought of the Sapphire Yacht, its secrets now laid bare, and the guess who had been forever changed. Do you think they'll ever forget it, Poirot? Clara, Carver, Fraser, Mrs. Langley. Poirot's expression was thoughtful. Forget? No, but they will move forward, as we all must. The sapphire yacht was a mirror, showing them their truths. For some, it is a lesson. For others, a warning. But for us, mon ami, it is a case closed, and a new chapter awaits. The cab rolled through London, the city alive with possibility. Hastings felt a quiet pride in his friend's brilliance, but also a sense of closure. The sapphire yacht had been a stage for tragedy, but Poirot's logic had brought light to its darkness. As they reached Poirot's flat, Hastings smiled, ready for whatever mystery lay ahead, knowing that with Hercule Poirot, the truth would always prevail. Word count, 1980. Chapter 15. The Curtain Falls. The London evening settled over Poirot's impeccably ordered flat, the soft glow of lamplight casting a warm ambiance across the room. The hustle of the city outside seemed a world away from the claustrophobic drama of the sapphire yacht, where Hercule Poirot had unraveled the murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne with his characteristic brilliance. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in a plush armchair, sipped a cup of tea, his mind still tethered to the event.
Flickering fire in the grate, his mustache a perfect arc of precision. The little Belgian's mind, Hastings knew, was never truly at rest. Even after a case as intricate as this one, the sapphire yacht had been a stage for human frailty, love, fear, greed, and Poirot had navigated its complexities with a clarity that Hastings could only admire. "Poirot," Hastings said, breaking the comfortable silence. "It's done, isn't it? The sapphire yacht is behind us. Lady Evelyn will face justice, and the others will move on. Yet I can't shake the feeling that there's something unresolved. The necklace, perhaps." Poirot set down his tisane, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Mon ami, you are persistent, as always. The necklace, oui, it remains missing. But its absence is no longer a mystery. Lady Evelyn took it, fearing the letter it concealed. A letter that held the secret of her past. Whether she hid it aboard or cast it into the sea, it matters little now. The truth is known, and the necklace, it is but a ghost of the crime." Hastings nodded, though his mind lingered on the emerald pendant, its hidden clasp a symbol of Lady Evelyn's desperation. "It's a grim business," he said. "She loved Sir Reginald in her way, but his cruelty drove her to murder. Do you think she'll ever find peace?" Poirot's expression softened, a rare glimpse of empathy in his precise demeanor. "Peace, Hastings. It is elusive for those who carry guilt. Lady Evelyn, she killed to escape her past. But in doing so, she bound herself to it forever. The law will judge her, but her heart, it will judge her more harshly. Such is the tragedy of crime." Hastings thought of the other guests, now scattered to their lives. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, facing scrutiny for her role in the diamond mine fraud, would likely navigate the legal consequences with her characteristic composure. Dr. Malcolm Fraser, his gambling debts exposed, had returned to London with a resolve to confront his weaknesses. Clara Wentworth, cleared of suspicion, would no doubt resume her sharp-tongued defiance, though Hastings wondered if the case had softened her edges. Julian Carver, ever the reserved solicitor, had retreated into his work, his secrets intact, but his silence heavier. "And the others, Poirot?" Hastings asked. "They're free, but they're changed, aren't they? The sapphire yacht was like a mirror, showing them their flaws." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "Précisément, mon ami. The yacht, it was a crucible, forcing each to face their truth. Madame Langley's ambition, Dr. Fraser's weakness, Mademoiselle Wentworth's pride, Monsieur Carver's secrecy. They were all laid bare,
The murder, it was Lady Evelyn's crime. But the yacht, it judged them all.
Pearl, the steward's sighting of a woman in a light-colored shawl. Poirot's trap, using the decoy necklace, had pressured Mrs. Langley into revealing her fraud. But it was Lady Evelyn's collapse under his questioning that had sealed the case. "You were masterful, Poirot," he said. "The way you used the pearl, the footprint, the trap. It was like watching a painter create a masterpiece." Poirot's smile was modest, though his eyes sparkled. "A painter, non. A weaver, perhaps, threading the clues into a tapestry of truth. The pearl, it was the key, unintentional, dropped in haste. It betrayed Lady Evelyn. The handkerchief, a clever misdirection to implicate Mademoiselle Wentworth. The footprint, the shawl, the poisoned glass, all were pieces of the puzzle, but it was her heart, her guilt that completed it." Hastings leaned back, marveling at Poirot's method. And the journal entries, E for Evelyn, C for Clara, M for Malcolm. They were so cryptic, yet you saw through them. "The journal," Poirot said. It was Sir Reginald's voice from beyond. He knew of betrayals, his wife's past, Madame Langley's fraud, Dr. Fraser's debts. He wrote in riddles, but the little gray cells they decipher. The emerald, he mentioned. It was the necklace, hiding the letter that drove Lady Evelyn to murder. The fire crackled, casting shadows across the room. Hastings felt a sense of closure, but also a lingering sadness. "It's a tragedy, isn't it, Poirot? Lady Evelyn, driven to such an act by fear. Could we have stopped her if we'd known sooner?" Poirot's gaze was thoughtful. "The heart, Hastings. It is a mystery even I cannot predict. We saw the signs, her tears, her nervousness, but the act, it was her choice. The role of Hercule Poirot is not to prevent, but to reveal. The truth, it is our justice." The clock on the mantel chimed, marking the late hour. Hastings thought of the sapphire yacht, now a distant memory, its decks silent and its secrets exposed. "What now, Poirot?" he asked. "Back to your quiet life? Or is there another mystery waiting?" Poirot's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Quiet, mon ami? Non, the world, it is never quiet. There are always mysteries, always truths to uncover. But for tonight we rest, we reflect, and we savor the order of a case well solved." He rose, adjusting his cuffs with with their drinks. The city outside hummed with life. Hastings thought of the guests, each facing their future. Mrs. Langley's legal battles, Dr. Fraser's redemption, Clara's defiance, Carver's reserve. Lady Evelyn, alone in her cell, would carry the weight of her crime, but her confession had freed the truth. The sapphire yacht was a memory now. Its story complete, but its lessons lingered. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice soft. "You always say the truth sets us free. Do you believe that, even for Lady Evelyn?" Poirot's expression was somber, his eyes fixed on the fire. "The truth, Hastings. It is a double-edged sword. For Lady Evelyn, it is both freedom and chains. She is free of her secret, but bound by her guilt. Yet the truth,
It is always necessary. Without it, we are lost in the shadows. The fire died down, its embers glowing softly. Hastings finished his tea, feeling a sense of peace. The sapphire yacht had been a journey through the darkest corners of the human heart. But Poirot's logic had prevailed, as it always did. As they retired for the night, Hastings knew that new mysteries awaited, and with Poirot by his side, no secret would remain hidden. The curtain had fallen on the sapphire yacht, but the stage of life was vast, and Hercule Poirot was ready for the next act.